It was dusk when Suresh came by for our session. Meanwhile, I checked my alien camera, but nothing came in front of the lens. Maybe New York was too crowded, not a safe place for them to show themselves. A few minutes after I had taken my weekly medicine and leaned back on the couch, I knew that I was on a roll. It seemed as if I was sitting in a bobsled, and all I had to do was to streamline myself so that I would offer no resistance to what was about to happen. My consciousness rushed into a big hall and suddenly stopped, dangling in the air as if someone had seized me by the collar. My stomach fluttered. I was hanging from a big round ceiling covered with intricate honeycombed shapes. Beneath me, the audience was silently staring at someone on the stage, someone in an embroidered black silk vest. My dad. Smoke wafted through the air in front of him, but there was no fire. The smoke was coming out of his fingers. I focused on the first few rows of the audience. A little girl was sitting on the far end of the first row, her hair tied into two shiny plaits, her eyes anxiously fixed on the stage. A few rows behind her, I recognized the man my dad had talked to in his office in my previous session. He sat with his arms crossed, eyes narrowed. My dad made some complicated hand gestures, whereupon the smoke formed into Chinese characters. The audience was gasping while the little girl was happily dangling her feet and pulling one of her braids. Tai Guy was nodding almost imperceptibly as if to himself. Then, I felt as if something was pulling me by my collar and the scene started to blur. Gently, I came out of my trance. When I opened my eyes, they met Suresh's. "Finished already?" he asked. "Yes, luckily. It's not the best feeling to hang from a ceiling," I said, and snuggled up against the soft couch. Suresh did not respond to my comment and asked, "Did you see anything?" "Yes, it was more detailed than ever. I was even able to zoom in on faces," I said, and gestured with my hands like my dad had done during his show. I saw my dad again. I had totally forgotten about this. He used to do magic shows here in New York. The Chinese kind of magic, fire magic. The guy from my previous trip was there, and I think I saw myself in the audience as a little girl. When I didn't sit behind the stage, my dad always let me sit in the first row of the audience, very close to him. Maybe he hoped that some of his magic would eventually rub off on me, I said. Seeing myself sitting there, I remembered how much I had wanted to please my dad. I had tried to figure out his magic tricks, but there had always been a link between reality and illusion that I couldn't figure out. And I did see the Chinese guy with the suit in the audience. My dad created some schemes out of smoke, whereafter the suit guy suddenly stood up and left the hall. "I figure he must have given him some kind of sign," I said. "Did you see what that sign was?" Suresh asked. "I think it was Dao Le. That means got it. Dao is also a Chinese philosophy that my dad appreciates a lot," I said. Even my Chinese teacher considered this word untranslatable. Language could not convey ideas about a philosophy that was all about constant change, she had said. Of course, so that could mean that he really did start to work for the suit guy, I guess. For the US government. So, if anything, we now have an even greater number of people who could be involved in his disappearance, Suresh said. "God, yes," I said and looked to the window. The night fell over the city, not covering and dampening all the noises, but somehow amplifying them and making them more distinct. How could I find my dad in this mess of light and sound, behind all these interwoven parts? He might even be in China now. So that makes two large countries, an infinite number of places. "Shit," I said, and I leaned my head against Suresh's shoulder. Suresh tried to remain objective. "Let's just start with what we know. We know that your dad is a spy. He has worked for the Chinese as well as for the American government. He used remote viewing during his work. Anything else?" he asked. I was thinking. The funny yellow and blue spots on the piece of paper. Los Alamos, the nuclear facility in New Mexico. I remember that there was a plan of the grounds in his office. The name somehow stuck with me, I said. That's interesting. Doesn't get us anywhere at the moment, though. Have you ever tried to find the place where you and your dad lived? Suresh asked. Not really. How am I supposed to find it among the millions of apartments here? I asked. Suresh picked up the LSD bottle and waved it in front of my face. Maybe with this? He said. Yeah, right. But even if I found it, surely it's been occupied by someone else for years, I said. Maybe. Maybe not. I mean, considering the circumstances, your dad went missing. You've been declared dead officially, he said. I couldn't help wincing. I wonder why they haven't let me disappear as well. Wouldn't it have made things much easier? I asked. They didn't need to. Maybe it's easier to wipe out someone's past and identity than to abduct them. After all, people tend to believe what is written in official forms, he said. Suresh grinned his kind of uneasy, restrained grin that looked like it yearned to be let loose like a wild animal. What? I asked. Nothing, just... I never had such an interesting relationship. Spies and all, he said. His grin got wider. Well, I'm certainly glad you're having fun, I said and furrowed my brow, whereupon Suresh let out a laugh and covered it with kisses. The LSD come-down was now accompanied by mood swings and frequent changes of perception. One day I thought that I oversaw it all, zooming out and seeing everything as a whole. The other day I was dazzled by the myriad of details that everything was comprised of, and the sight of the most ordinary things, such as the hairbrush which I had left on the kitchen table, almost made me cry. On such days, I couldn't even set one foot in front of the door. I stayed inside, watched videos on simulation theory, and stared endlessly at the Luopan and its concentric rings filled with wisdom from the I Ging. I wondered how people from the 3rd century before Common Era could have developed such an evolved binary system. Had they known some secret code underlying all creation? When Suresh came by, he almost immediately went to the kitchen sink and filled the usual glass of water with dutiful accuracy. We didn't have sex much these days. My primal drive seemed to have been eroded by the drug, like a plant that had been plucked with its roots. I had nothing to ground me anymore. Suresh didn't seem to miss it. He was a lighthouse, shining on everything with equanimous conscientiousness, guiding me through my dark hours. Right now, he was standing in the doorway to the kitchen, wearing his familiar striped sweater. How about going back to the one memory you have, where you listen in on your dad and his colleagues doing remote viewing, and then step away from the scene until you stand in front of your apartment, he said. You think that will work? I mean, I'm not sure if I'll be able to move around consciously in my memory. I've never tried it, I said. It's worth a shot. Do you ever have lucid dreams? He asked. I thought about it. Sometimes. How does it usually happen that you realize you're in a dream? Suresh asked and put the glass down on the table. I thought about it. It's different every time. Most of the time I realize that there's something wrong with my body, that I have 6 fingers or that I can't see my legs, I said. Perfect. Then just try to focus on your body. After all, it's the one variable that you know inside out, he said. How do you know so much about this? I asked. I've done my homework and read up about remote viewing, Suresh said and grinned. It's the practice of seeking impressions about a distant or unseen object, purportedly sensing with the mind. Did you just quote? I chuckled. Suresh continued without answering my question. The object is also called a target and can be distant in space or time. Apparently, the U.S. Army has already used it. There was also some research to validate the technique, but in my opinion, it's just a fancy name for clairvoyance. A pseudoscience, he said. I rolled my eyes. All right, my docile student, then watch this, I said, took the glass and gulped down its contents. After half an hour, I could feel the acid gliding through my veins. Always gliding, never shooting, that was its way. Finally, a coherent picture formed before my closed eyes. I was standing in front of the ajar door of my father's study. I heard the hum of low voices, very faint and indistinguishable. I tried to have a look around, but it seemed as if my neck was made of concrete. My body seemed to be remotely controlled. Somehow, I had to regain control over it. I forced my eyes to look down at it. Where my arms and hands should be, there was nothing. Very slowly, I felt conscious power flowing into my limbs. I tried to move, but my feet seemed glued to the ground. I tried to focus all my energy into my legs, and very slowly, inch by inch, I was able to move them. The room around me began to sway, making my head feel dizzy. Cautiously, I moved towards the door which led to the hall. All of a sudden, I noticed a tap on the shoulder and startled. Slowly, I forced my eyes to glance at my shoulder. A braid. I was inside my 7-year-old self. The further I moved across the room, the more parts of the apartment seemed to vanish. The wall that separated the room from the hall was completely gone. Only the door was still visible. Panic rose up inside of me as I saw the door vanish slowly. How could I get through it when it was no longer there? I needed to have a glimpse of the apartment from the outside to take hold of any clue as to where it was located. I started again when something brushed my hip. A chair, a table next to that. There was a large white envelope on the table. An envelope? With an address? I tried to focus on it, but the letters were blurry. The only thing I could see were numbers. 10,011. 111 11th. A moment later, the table was gone. After that, the floor. My stomach dropped and I prepared for a fall. Instead, I cracked open my eyes. I was sitting on my couch again. "What happened?" Suresh asked. He had waited patiently in the real world, as always. "I couldn't even get to the door. It vanished as soon as I managed to move," I said. "Shit. Yeah, we didn't talk about that before. Maybe you remember from your lucid dreams. It's really hard to hold these dream images steady. At some point, your rationality kicks in again and dissolves everything," he said. "At least I managed to get to the table. There was an envelope with an address on it. I could only make out a little bit. 10,011, 111 11th Avenue. Isn't that strange? I don't think that means anything, does it?" I was thinking. Some people call 11 the angel number. It indicates that someone is reaching a higher level of consciousness, I said. I had really picked up a lot from all the podcasts. "So I guess that was only my mind's fabrication. This can't be a real address," I said. Suresh frowned. "How can you decide that this is only in your mind and all of the other stuff you saw? The hospital, your dad on stage, wasn't. Postcode 10011, it must exist, right? 11 TH Avenue? Sounds like a binary code, really," he said. "Jesus, you're right," I said. "The I Ching, the first binary system. My dad had loved the I Ching." "I think we should give it a try," Suresh said. Determined, he crossed his arms in front of his chest. Sometimes I almost had the feeling that he was as enthusiastic about the whole search as I was. "I think so too," I said, feeling a rush of excitement. Was I soon to see our old apartment again? The place where my dad had all his secret meetings while I sat at the table in the dining room and drew from memory some secret plan I had seen in his study? Where we sometimes, on the rare occasions when he wasn't busy, would sit on the couch in the living room at the very end of the apartment, watching the news from old Heartland China, and all the commercials because I insisted on them. Where there was a picture of my mother on the wall, her eyes staring dreamily into a distant future that she would never experience. Before we went to sleep, I looked up the I Ching on the internet. Number 11. Thai. Peace. 3 long lines on the bottom, 6 short ones on the top. The long lines representing the sky, the short ones the earth. As above, so below, only that heaven and earth were turned upside down. The material world was emerging from the spiritual world, not the other way around. That was so much like my dad. After his wife, my mother, had died, peace and harmony were the only things my dad had wanted for himself, for us,